Hello, good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Minds on Guard, where we're learning how to guard our minds against all of the various manipulations and attacks that we come under here in the 21st century. We are going to shift gears a little bit with respect to our examination of the declines in education here in the United States. We've been doing a series that examines all of the ways that the education system has been infiltrated and co-opted by people who would design to control our behaviors and our thoughts. Much of what we've been covering deals with the failures within the curriculums designed to teach reading, as well as the infiltration of behavioral psychology into our classrooms. There really is quite a lot more to discuss within those areas, but tonight, I want to zoom out a bit and introduce a thinking error that is tied directly to some of the most destructive corruption that we see today in the world, particularly in the institutions of academia, medicine, and even business. The kind of corruption that I'm referring to is not necessarily obvious or overtly sinister and manipulative. It can be that when it takes this form, but rather it occurs more so in response to the more overt actions of manipulation. This fallacy appears mainly as a driver of self-preservation and avoiding conflict. I'm talking about the sunk cost fallacy. In this video, we're going to go through an introduction to this fallacy, as well as some relatively harmless examples, although not entirely harmless, of what it looks like. Even though what we will look at in this intro to the fallacy may appear mild or at least changeable or in some ways not quite as sinister as what we've been covering in the past, when left to rule our thoughts and our behaviors, especially by the people of positions of power and authority within the medical and educational spheres, the sunk cost fallacy leads to some of the most serious problems society has ever faced. It's important that we learn how to spot this fallacy in our own thinking, as it has the potential to cause us to compromise even our most sincerely held beliefs regarding morality and ethics. If we're not diligent in our thinking and stalwart in our integrity, we may be easily pushed into bending to the will of forces which prey on any number of fears and weaknesses. The forces of evil will look for cracks in our metaphorical armor and exploit our weak areas to gain influence and control. We must not live in fear of the world, but rather be prepared to deal with the attacks and manipulations that may come our way. Often, those come from within our own minds, as responses to potentials, as well as attempts to maintain some sort of sense of control over our environment. With all of this in mind, let's look at what the sunk cost fallacy is and how it arises in various situations throughout our lives. The sunk cost fallacy is the tendency for people to continue an endeavor or a course of action even when abandoning it would be more beneficial to them. Because we have invested our time, our energy, or any other resources, we feel that it would all have been for nothing if we quit. Now, there are a great deal many other logical fallacies nested within this sort of thinking, and each will carry its own context and distinctions. Yet the overall appeal to emotions of fear and the feeling of loss of what appeared to be some kind of stability or benefit inevitably leads to the sunk cost fallacy. We do this all the time, and it really is a fairly understandable result when we think about investing time, money, or physical energy in something. We want to come away from those investments with some kind of return that says that it was all worthwhile. We want our efforts to be meaningful and produce fruit that's good. This speaks to our deeper purpose as God's imagers and the things that He has willed for us within His creation. Unfortunately, we, in our fallen and self-serving state, can all too easily fixate on the feelings driven by the desire for our investments to be ones of growth and positive outcomes, that we will forsake truth and begin to manipulate ourselves and the world around us in order to get the desired outcomes that provide the feelings of positive return on our investment. Take some time while watching this video to pause and consider areas of your life where you have committed the sunk cost fallacy. What did it look like, and why did you stick to any particular course of action or thinking for so long? Please leave any comments that you feel comfortable sharing. In my life, there have been many examples of this. One in particular nearly cost me everything I owned. By appealing to my desires for material success, I fixated on all of the time that I had spent living a certain way and earning my income from a single means. I began to think that if I abandoned that way of life after nearly 15 years of pursuing my goals, so that I could provide for myself in other ways, or heaven forbid, pursue other interests, that I would actually be a failure, that my dreams and aspirations would go up in flames in an instant, and I would have no hope of achieving happiness and contentment in my life, that all of that time and effort would have meant nothing. I placed such a high value on the time that I had spent pursuing one ideal way of life and the image that I had cultivated, that I blinded myself to the other options for success that were available to me. This is something that happens all the time. We fixate on a single way of thinking and believing about the world, and we blind ourselves to other option states or other choices that are available to us. I gave up my control of my thoughts and my capacity to solve problems because I had convinced myself that if things didn't look a certain way, I could not, under any circumstances, allow what felt like a deviation from what I thought would yield the fruit that I wanted. All the while, through years of appeals to fear and the loss of some fabricated ideal, I continued down a spiral of poor decisions, bad thinking, and selfish motivations that led me to the brink of homelessness and destitution. In that state, through God's provision, I humbled myself to the truth that my value was not held in any of the things that I thought it was. That one act of submission was enough to knock me back into reality and to stop placing so much weight on the emotions that I felt and the desires that I had, and I began the journey of appealing to truth rather than the sunk costs that had driven me to such low places. I would continue to stumble and live in delusion for a while, and I still do. But I know now that if I just let go of what I want the truth to be and instead appeal to the objective state of reality, I will be in the best state from which to grow and cultivate good fruit in my life and the lives of those I love. Where do we see the sunk cost fallacy occur today? If you search through Google or even YouTube to learn more about this fallacy, you will predominantly find many people talking about two areas of life where this fallacy arises. The first is in many business decisions, and the second is in the context of relationships. Regarding the business arena, we often see this fallacy play out when the real losses of any business venture are ignored by the people investing their resources in favor of the potential for gain. Take an example where a tech startup company invests $50,000 to develop a new app designed to help people organize their time. They work and they work, and they program and code, and finally produce a product that they're able to place onto the market. Once there, the flaws and inherent issues with the product, along with an oversaturated market, cause the app to stall and uptake is seriously lacking. So much so that the company is in real danger of going under unless things turn around and fast. Rather than cut the losses and attempt to pivot to a more sound investment, the company owners believe in the potential of the product and take out another $100,000 loan for marketing development and rebranding to try and get their product on the top of the heap. One owner actually borrows against the equity in their home in order to finance the project. Unfortunately, the market just doesn't need what this company is offering, and now, because of the desire for loss aversion in the company owners, they're on the hook in major ways and are now unable to recoup the costs of what they invested. Had they accepted the truth after the initial $50,000 loss, they may have been able to arrive at a more profitable venture, or even split off and invest their remaining resources in ways that could pay off for them. Instead, their appeal to the sunk cost fallacy cost them dearly. In the area of relationships, a common example of the sunk cost fallacy arises when discussing issues involving a narcissistic partner and the abuse that is present in a codependent relationship, where the person being abused by the narcissist cannot let go of the relationship and continues to endure the abuse for long periods of time, sometimes indefinitely. Often, in codependent relationships, there are certain needs being met on both sides. These so-called needs aren't actually needs, but more so desires to feel some sense of fulfillment or safety where there has been a lack due to trauma or some other issue in the person's past. In both cases, there is a type of manipulative control going on, but this typically manifests in different ways. The narcissistic partner is usually dominating and aggressively controlling, using the other person to fulfill their own desires for love and power in the relationship. They will abuse and gaslight and use any and all means to serve their own ego and trap the other person in a cycle of pain and misery. On the flip side, the codependent enabling tendencies of the person being abused are acting on their thinking processes in really damaging ways as well. Their desire for love and a sound relationship outweighs the reality of the abuse. Often they will endure the pain, rationalizing it by saying things like, "I can change them," or "they really are a loving person, things are just hard right now," or even more tragically, "They're all I've got, I can't do any better." With respect to the abused person, they do not value themselves correctly and instead appeal to the long-term emotional investment and the fear of losing some potential ideal that they forsake their own true needs and endure a life of misery and pain. Were they to appeal to the truth, they would see that they have much more to gain by leaving the abusive relationship. There is freedom, love, and an abundance of joy to be found in healthy relationships. Yet, due to the appeals to the sunk cost, the abuse continues, and more lives are ruined because of it. These two examples are the more common explanations of what the sunk cost fallacy looks like in our lives today. In coming videos, we're going to take a look at how this fallacy plays out in the areas of education, both in higher ed and the primary schools. In this exploration, we're going to focus on the administrative side of things, as well as the monetary investments that have continued to be used to appeal to more and more sunk costs, only yielding poorer and poorer results in students' learning. We will also touch on this fallacy's presence in the medical arena and how that has led to a seriously harmful state of things where children are subjected to massive amounts of chemical interventions that are causing them to lose their ability to think and develop healthy minds and bodies so that they can live and thrive in this world. There is a lot going on here, and all of it has its deepest roots in the agendas for control over society. We have touched on this a bit in previous videos when we spoke about drugs like Ritalin, and all of this has driven the psychological, emotional programming agendas that we have spoken about in so many videos. The ones who have designed that agenda understand human behavior all too well, and they use our proclivity to appeal to the sunk costs in our lives to maintain their influencing power in the world today. Please leave a comment on the ways that you see this playing out, and we may discuss some of what you all are seeing. Until next time, stay safe, check in on your family and loved ones, and stay diligent and vigilant with your minds on guard.